Thanks to all of you for being a part of our first ever virtual homecoming week. And we are so excited to be able to welcome all of you, but also, I guess, just kind of bringing the Tigerland spirit to all of you with a homecoming at home. Although I think maybe I recognize some work environments in some of these Zoom pictures. But for those of you that don't know me, I'm Tammy Welbrock, and I am the interim executive director for the Fort Hays State University Alumni Association. And I really got to come in at a really fun time. Some hard work was already done prior to coming on, and that was the work of selecting 7 outstanding award recipients. And so I just get to come along and celebrate. So thanks to all of those. I think there are a few of you on the call that were part of that process. But let's get to why you are all here, and that is get to know Charlie Riedel. And if you can't tell by the way maybe Charlie and I chat, we go way back. I remember being a journalism major a few years after Mr. Charlie had graduated in '83, and he came and talked to us in school, and then I got an internship and worked with him at the local newspaper, and I've been very fortunate to have Charlie not as a mentor, not just as a mentor, but also as a friend. And so shout out to he and his wife Denise, another Fort Hays grad. But Charlie got his journalism, well, his bachelor's in communication with an emphasis in journalism. He's an award-winning photojournalist and currently working with the Associated Press. And I know that we're going to get into, let me get some of my questions here for you, Charlie. But some of what you've been able to do is, it's usually shared by you, Charlie, as a, can you please pass the butter type voice. And it's that's what I love about you. You've been at the Olympics. You've got to photograph royalty. You get to go, well, and I'm actually talking the royalty by blood. Some of us might call that Super Bowl and World Series royalty by athleticism. But why don't you talk a little bit about your accomplishments? We've all here at the alumni office have been able to review your credentials. But why don't you share some of your accomplishments and give us an idea of what life has been like for Charlie Riedel?
Well, first, it's an honor to be honored and recognized, and thank you all for joining in on this. I appreciate that. I've really had a very fortunate life, actually, because I've never really had a job in the sense that a lot of people think of jobs. I mean, I went to Fort Hays, I got this foundation for what I do, and then I went out and did it. And I basically went briefly to the Salina Journal after I graduated in '83, and that was for like 4 or 5 months. Had the opportunity to come back to Hays for several reasons. It was a better paper at the time. My wife, who I met at Fort Hays, Denise, had not finished her degree, and there was an opportunity for her to do that. So we thought we'd come back for a little while, and we ended up being there for 17 years. And in 2000, I had the opportunity to go to AP, and I came to Kansas City and did that, and I've been here ever since. But so my experiences, I mean, I'm not sure if I'd call them experiences or accomplishments or whatever, but I feel really privileged because in my role, both at the Hays Daily News and at the AP, they're sort of on different ends of the photojournalism spectrum. And they both have given me great opportunities that are very different from each other. Hays Daily News at the time was one of the best community journalism newspapers in the country. And it gave me an opportunity to do community journalism, just, from doing stories on people that did interesting things, to doing pictures of people that mow their lawn, but doing it in a way where it's interesting to anyone that picks up the paper and picks up that and looks at that picture and goes, wow, that's an interesting picture of somebody doing nothing. So Fort Hays Daily News gave me the opportunity to look at life on a small scale very closely and really try to document that in an unusual manner. Coming to the AP, suddenly that world is behind me in a lot of ways, because we don't do so much of, we do things with the mindset that's got to, should be of interest to people nationally, globally, on a bigger scale. And we still do like interesting pictures of people doing nothing or whatever, but that's not our focus, So at AP, I've got the opportunity to kind of put that basic skill that I honed at the Hays Daily News to work on bigger stories. I've done wildfires, I've done hurricanes, I've done major tornadoes like Joplin and Moore, Oklahoma, and I've been on the roof of Buckingham Palace. I've been in 100 feet underground in a nuclear missile silo. Things that, there's all kinds of things that you would never get to do just like, oh, that'd be fun. Can I do that? Which is kind of the beauty of what I do, is it lets me get into situations, opportunities that no one could normally just do, and experience lots of different worlds, whether it be, knocking on some farmer on his tractor and saying, can I ride with you and take some pictures? Or, there's so many things really. But beyond that, there's a lot of sports involved. I've gone to Super Bowls and Masters and spring training every year. And lots of things. World Series, Olympics, there's, 6 or 7 Olympics now. Well, I was actually supposed to be in Japan, but well, we all know what happened with that. But so anyway, that's kind of my life. Like I said, I feel pretty fortunate to have been able to do this for the last 37, 8 years, whatever it is.
I've had opportunity to talk to you about some of these individual stories and experiences, but can you share a little bit more? I think many of us on this call are thinking, wow, how glamorous that you get to do some of these things. And yet it is work, and it is also routine work, having to try to find the new focus or the new angle to make it still fresh. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges? Because I know even the glamorous life has taken you away from your friends and your family for long periods of time.
Well, yeah, well, and glamorous isn't the word I would use either, but no, you're right. It is work. I did the PGA golf tournament in San Francisco, and I had days where I walked 18 miles carrying camera gear all day. And you do that 4 or 5 days, 6 days in a row. And, that's a lot of work really, but, well, it is for me anyway, but there's other kinds of stress involved. There's things like, I've been to protests and riots and stuff like that, where I've been tear gassed and you wear a flak jacket and a gas mask and all that. And it's not a walk. That's not glamorous. But so I don't know where we were exactly, but like I say, it is a lot of work, but it is, in relative to work that a lot of people do, it's really, again, I feel fortunate because it's very rewarding to me. It's rewarding to make a good picture out of, situations that aren't obviously good pictures, and to kind of, use the skills that I've developed over the years to show ordinary things in an unordinary way, which is really my goal, because my goal is for people, when they see a picture, to take a second look at it and go, wow, that's nice, I like that, or that's interesting, or that tells me something. Because there's so many pictures in the world today, so many images bombarding everyone every day, that you really need to, make something that kind of stands out a little bit.
Can you talk a little bit? You're right, we are inundated with so many visual images, maybe some might even call it noise. And can you talk a little bit, though, about the role that a photojournalist has, separate from anybody that has the camera on their phone at their disposal, but also, and not to, I think it's crucial to let everybody understand too, that the role you have in documenting such a story, I mean, you are a record keeper of history. And I know you had shared that one time with me when talking about your time with Joplin, and you were one of the first ones there on the scene, and you were seeing some horrific things, but you knew your role was to document. And I don't want to put more words in your mouth. Why don't you share more about just your theory on all that?
Well, I mean, there's several facets to that. I do see myself as a documenting the world around me, and I, from day one at Fort Hays, walking around campus, taking pictures, whatever. I didn't really get involved in a lot of activities or groups or stuff like that. And a big part of why is, A, I was pretty busy just, doing what I do, but B, I see my role as to be an unbiased observer and recorder of the world around me. And that said, I'll interpret it with my own vision, my own way, but I try not to let that be colored by, well, I am part of this group, so I'm going to make this group look good or whatever. But beyond that, I mean, things like Joplin, you go to things like that and you see, house after house after house of people just, survivors picking through little shreds of rubble and, trying to find whatever they can. And, on one hand, your instinct is that, well, I should help this person. And, if there's something I can do to help them, like, well, they're trying to lift this table up and see what's under it and they're all by themselves, I'll do that. But my main role is to record that and document that and share that with the world. And generally, more good comes from that than what I could do on a macro level, just of somebody just helping someone sort through stuff or whatever, because people will see that, they'll react, and they'll donate to relief funds, and they'll maybe put together a truckload of supplies or a truckload of volunteers or whatever. But it motivates a larger audience to actually do more good than one person could possibly do all by themselves. So, there is sort of that role. But yeah, I mean, obviously if you get to a scene or something and somebody is in, like in a medical emergency or something, and no one else would probably be better qualified to help, is there to help, I would do whatever I could, but generally, I just try to stand back, let things happen and record it and try to share that with the greater audience.
Well, let's take this to a lighter note. When was the first time Charlie Riedel held a camera and took a picture? How old were you? When did you realize this is what you wanted to do?
Well, so I was a little bit, I actually owe a lot of this to my older brother, who was 9 years older than I. And he had built a darkroom in the basement of my parents' house. And he was old enough that by the time I was like in ninth grade or eighth grade, whatever, he basically moved out and this darkroom was still there. And so, I just decided, this might be kind of interesting to, so I had some cheap little $15 plastic camera that took like 110 film and went and took some really, really, really bad pictures and, processed it. And when you start doing that, there's like, like the old days, you actually had chemistry. You didn't know what you had till after you processed your film. But when you see that, it's sort of magical seeing that image come up and making prints, and they were really bad. And it was really, but I was kind of hooked at that point. I mean, I didn't know that I would do that, but that was like the first, that kind of got me hooked. And then, I went to Hayes High and got on the newspaper and the yearbook there and took even more bad pictures. And kind of at some point you have to decide, well, what am I going to do? And I kind of had an interest in architecture or that, and then math kind of got in the way. So yeah, so that's really all I've done ever since.
So, as far as you have been, I believe, nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, correct? For your pictures of the Gulf oil spill. Can you talk a little bit about the experience of photographing and recording that?
So the oil spill, so here's the thing with AP is very often I'm not the first guy on the scene. Like there's a tornado in Joplin and I'm not there for the tornado. There's a hurricane, I'm not there for the hurricane. There's a wildfire, I'm not there when it starts. But a lot of things, I go in like several days later and spend a week or two covering the story, right? And the oil spill is sort of the same thing. It, it blew up, it started, and probably several weeks after that, it was an ongoing story. It happened, I think middle of April. I ended up going like middle of May. And by then it was a story that, had been a month and it was pretty much not on front pages anymore. It was still a story, but it was like, there had been no oil that had washed up on the shore. There'd been, very few animals affected that anyone knew of. And it was a really difficult story to get to cover because, you'd stay in New Orleans, but everything was happening in the Gulf. And at that point, AP was getting tired of like renting helicopters, which is really expensive and stuff like that, or renting boats or stuff like that, because it's a month old. So at that point, you would go down to the coast and you would try to hitch a ride with whomever you could, Greenpeace or some local parish or whatever, sometimes I think once we rented a helicopter and we shared it with like the LA Times or something like that. But so it was hard to cover. And so I basically did 2 weeks and, I kind of covered it, came back home for like a week and then went back down. Well, when I went back down, it was still pretty much a real dead story. And like the second day that I went back down on like a second tour, I had an opportunity to go with the governor and a group of journalists. And it was really a story about them. They built this sandbar on this island that was uninhabited. And it was mostly for erosion control. It had been in the works anyway, but they were showing it all how well this will stop the oil from encroaching and whatnot. And so it's another one of those things like, well, this is, not going to be very exciting. And I get there, and I was the only still photographer. The rest were TV folks, and they were all over 100 feet away, you know, talking to the governor, doing, you know, with their mics in his face. And I just wandered around and look, and there's these birds in the water, just totally covered with oil. I mean, they were just drenched. I mean, it was really sad. But I also knew at the time that no one had seen pictures like that from this whole scene yet. And this is 6 weeks after it started. And it really brought a lot of attention to the story again. I mean, I think, you know, it was on the front page of several hundred newspapers, and a congressman held one up in Congress, trying to get, you know, legislation, some sort of legislation passed. And so I guess you could say it went viral because, you know, my phone blew up, and, you know, Facebook blew up, and I really don't do Facebook, but my wife and daughter decided to set up a Charlie Riedel photographer page just to handle all that stuff. And yeah, so it really was kind of a game changer in the middle of this story that had been dormant for some time. And yeah, I mean, I didn't win a Pulitzer, which is, I mean, there was also an earthquake in Haiti that year, but which was kind of a big deal.
We know better.
But it's good to be honored. I mean, it's good. It's really, I don't know, it's a little, it feels good to do stories that affect people, that, you know, make people think, make people, you know, realize the world they live in.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that picture of the oil covered pelican, I think was, and then, or bird, whatever bird that was, you know, it's resonated through time. So certainly many of your photos resonate, and I'm a proud owner of a Charlie Riedel print on my wall at home of the Saint Fidelis Basilica in Victoria. So I think that was I remember when that was a Hayes Daily Time photo.
Black and white?
What?
Black and white? Probably.
It must be. Yeah. So, but, well, okay. So we have people listening on Facebook Live, and we anticipate there are a number of students from Fort Hays that are also joining us in that platform. What would you, from the days that you had that little cheap plastic camera, I think you called it, to today, what advice would you have for somebody thinking about or maybe just entering this career path?
Well, that's a tough one because this career has changed so much from when I got into it. I mean, you know, I'm a still photographer, always have been, always want to be. And that's really my first love. But, you know, now there's so much more with social media. I mean, if you want to get into this, you have to almost be a multi-talented journalist. I mean, you have to be able to write, you have to be able to do video, you have to be able to stream stuff, you know, social media, Facebook Live kind of streams. You have to be able to, and still photography, which is what I really love, is almost buried at the bottom of that list of things to do, which is a little sad because, you know, I still think the power of a still photo is pretty powerful. If it's done right, if it's a photo that is really done well, it can have a lot more impact in a lot of ways than just a lot of moving pictures that are kind of whatever. Because you know, you can study it and you can see nuances and you can appreciate it. You take time to appreciate it instead of just a bunch of fleeting images that, I mean, they all have their place, but so I guess, my advice would be, if this is something you really want to do, I don't expect to get rich, but do it because you love to do it. And work hard, set a goal, but you always have to be thinking in the back of your mind, just like I've always had this mentality when I've done still photography, that especially, in Hays, Kansas, when I was driving the streets looking for any interesting picture and would often have to settle on something that was inherently very boring. It's like, okay, well, this is going to be a guy painting his fence, but it's going to be the best darn picture of a guy painting his fence that anyone's ever seen. And rarely did I achieve that goal, but I sure tried.
Well, and then I think that's a great piece of advice for anybody aspiring to do whatever it is.
Exactly.
Just need to do it to the best of their ability.
Yeah. Don't, just work hard.
Yeah. So there's a game that we like to play in our family when we're watching, usually sporting events. It's I Spy Charlie Riedel. And so we're always looking for you on the sidelines and wherever, and that has really been fun. And so when you talked about your time here on campus, I went immediately to that in my mind about you being in Lewis Field and you being, of course, and I remember my own college days, there was still Charlie Riedel there. So, and you just have a way of blending in, and that's a fun game. I recommend all of you to start that game. But talk a little bit more about your time, not maybe what you did, but what you felt. What were some special memories that you may have with your time on campus? I mean, maybe marrying your wife ought to be up there, but what are some, was it an event? Was it a teacher? Was it a class? Just share something with your time about Fort Hays, and then we'll get to where we can have some of the people that are on this call also be able to ask some questions.
Yeah, I really have a hard time recalling a lot of special events. I mean, specific events. The whole experience for me was pretty special, I think. And again, I was a bit fortunate. I mean, one of the coolest things was having a corner office on the second floor of Martin Allen Hall overlooking the quad. As the photo editor of The Leader and the Reveille, which was in the second floor of Martin Allen Hall, I had an office, and I had a great view. I can look out my window, I can see, hey, there's someone over there doing something kind of cool, so I can run down the back steps and get a picture of them or whatever. But it was also a great place to, kind of call home base and, leave my stuff here and go to class there. And so, Martin Allen Hall was a very special place to me, but that said, there were a lot of great teachers. I mean, there really are, and a lot of them took an interest in you, what you do. You weren't just like, oh, just another student, and it wasn't, just me. They were, the beauty of Fort Hays is small enough, where people get to know each other and care, but it's big enough where you have a lot of, you get the opportunities and education you need, but I should probably give Jack Jackson a shout out, because he was, the retired head of the photo services at Fort Hays. And as a freshman, after, an incoming freshman with nothing but my really bad high school photos to show, he gave me the opportunity to work for him and do work in photo services, which, segued into The Leader and Reveille and all that. And Jack had been supportive of me all through college and way beyond. And, I still, I cover spring training in Phoenix every year, and that's where Jack and his wife, Margaret, retired to. And, I try to go out and have lunch with them once every year. So that's kind of good. But yeah, I mean, I got to give Jack a lot of credit for just basically giving me the guidance and the opportunity to get started in photography in a more serious way. And yeah.
Wow. You know, of all the times we've talked, Charlie, I did not realize we had that in common because I worked for Jack Jackson as well, and he was my advisor. So what a small world.
Right. Yeah. He was actually also my advisor. I guess I kind of forget that role.
Well, we want to, and I don't know whether Charlene, if you've had anybody send a question, I might just have you take over, Charlene, if you're, and I'm trying to get to my screen here. Was there any questions that have come up behind on our chat that we can? Oh, well, you know what? I've got a question here. So Charlene, you keep looking through the others, but I want to ask this one. Can you talk about what it's like to be at the Olympics? What's a day like for you while covering the Olympics?
Well, that's a good question. So at the Olympics, AP generally sends a crew of several dozen photographers and photo editors, and all but two of us or so basically are assigned to a certain event. Like, so you may be a photographer for basketball for 2 weeks, or a photographer for, you know, athletics or swimming or whatever. And, but I'm always a roamer. And I think they think maybe I have a short attention span or something. But what a roamer does basically is, okay, if someone needs help with, you know, they have a big day and at a venue, they need help, you know, I'll go in and do that. But I'll also, you know, if I had nothing going on exciting or whatever, I'll go in and I'll try to make, you know, I'll go, well, so, you know, archery sounds interesting, and I'll go to that venue and I'll try to make some more unique, unusual kind of photos and stuff that maybe is a little more, more artistic in some ways, and not just solely recording the event, something that gives people, and it may not even be an event. It may be, well, because there's other things with Olympics. There's, you know, there's fans, there's venues, you know, there's big encompassing scenery, overview scenery kind of thing. So I will do a lot of just not the bread and butter stuff, but sort of the I don't know, the frosting on the cake, I guess. And sometimes I'm successful with that, and sometimes I'm not as successful as I'd like. And so yeah, that's, man, I usually go in a little bit early and do, you know, things pictures that lead up to it, you know, neat pictures of Olympic rings and people looking at them, just more featurey kind of stuff. A lot of it is, you know, again, that goes back to the skills that I started with at Fort Hays and honed at the Hays Daily News, and have been using ever since, making interesting pictures out of, you know, sort of ordinary things. But so yeah, it's actually one of the funnest things I cover, the Olympics, because I get to be really creative. I get to cover sports that I would never get to cover, you know, because, you know, in Kansas City, I do football, baseball, basketball. Well, yeah, I think that's it pretty much. Soccer sometimes, but you know, Olympics, you know, I'll go to a sport and I'll cover it, and it may be maybe a gold medal match or something, and it's like, I've never heard of this sport. I don't know the rules. I don't know how someone wins, you know. And so I think that's a little ironic that these people have been like working their whole lives to get to this level, and then you come in to photograph it and it's like, okay, so what's this called?
Well, there's another string of questions on our chat that I'm going to kind of dual ask. so basically a lot of the group wants to know, is there a special picture that just really, I guess, resonates with you that you've taken through the years? But furthermore, is there a picture that created controversy and maybe you regret doing? Oh, I got him to lean back on that one.
I have to think about that one. I mean, as far as special pictures, there's a lot of pictures that are special for different reasons. I mean, you know, the oil spill stuff is special because it affected so many people, and it catapulted a story that had been dormant into, you know, into the mainstream again. But there's a lot of smaller pictures that are special. And it's hard to come up with examples. I mean, if I was to look at things, I could do that, but for different reasons. Like, you know, this was a really gratifying experience. This was a really, you know, I feel like I really did a great job with this one, or I feel like, that said, I don't think I've ever done a perfect picture. I don't think that's possible, but that's what I try for. But so as far as things that I regret, I could be like Donald Trump and say I don't regret anything in my life, but I'm sure I do. But we won't go into that. But you know, I try to be fair in my coverage, even if I don't personally agree with something, you know. And so I try really hard to be unbiased and show things fairly. And I'm sure there have been times where people looked at pictures and felt like I didn't, perhaps, but I really can't come up with any examples of that. But you know, nothing stands out. I guess the only thing even remotely that comes to my head right now is I covered Trump's rally in Tulsa, and I didn't cover the rally itself. This was in June. It was kind of a big deal because of the first big rally like that after COVID, right? And there were a lot of counter protesters, and so I covered outside all the protesters. And I don't know how many are you familiar with the Boogaloo movement, but it's a bunch of they're right-wing people that carry guns to marches and stuff like that, and they dress up in Hawaiian clothes underneath their like camo and flak jackets and stuff like that. And I had a picture of some of these guys, and I captioned them as part of the Boogaloo movement because it seemed fairly obvious, where I didn't necessarily confirm that. And I feel confident they probably were, because they, you know, they checked off all the boxes, but you know, I didn't confirm that. So I kind of regret things like that, but nothing has caused a major stir.
Interesting. Well, there have been several people wanting to know how they can purchase their own Charlie Riedel photo. So I'm wondering if that's a Denise now pop on and do that. No, but how can we? I mean, is that?
You know, it depends on what you want to purchase and what you want to use it for. But if you know, I kind of got out of the, you know, when I was working at Hayes, I was a lot less financially secure than I am now, and I would sell reprints as part of a way to, you know, supplement my income. And I kind of got out of that world, you know, since I went to AP, partially because AP is another name for Associated Press is anonymous photographer. You know, you're just some guy somewhere that shot a picture somewhere that shows up in some newspaper. But so people don't really reach out for that very often. Anyway, if there's something that you really want, let me know. We'll figure something out. But I mean, I'm not in this reprint business to make money, but you know, we can figure something out. Just
Yeah.
Thank you. That, it is, we've got more questions for you, Charlie, but let me just share that it's fun to put you in front of the camera. I'm taking great pleasure in this.
It is
So,
not.
yeah, you're welcome. So, okay, so Charlene Nichols, our assistant alumni director, has also gotten some questions. And so I think she's going to unmute herself and just directly ask those as well.
I was hoping to stay off camera for this session, so gosh darn it. But I am happy to ask these questions on behalf of some folks. Harry Watts wants to know if you have had an interest in nature photography.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm like diehard interested in nature photography, but and so what I do a lot of, I don't do specialize in anything necessarily, but I do a lot of everything. And I enjoy shooting, like last summer I went up to North Dakota to do something on prairie potholes, which are these little pockets of water just scattered all over the state, just little ponds basically. And as part of that, that was nothing but nature photography for the most part. And I spent lots of time shooting pictures of birds and stuff like that, and wildlife, and so I enjoy it, but it's not something that I'm not diehard to where I'm going to like sit out in some under some cover in some field and for 8 hours to get a picture of a deer or something like that. But no, I enjoy pretty much every aspect of photography, and being able to do a variety is awesome.
Harry also wants to know if you've had the opportunity to work with Rob Clark, who is also a native of Hayes, and I guess he works with the National Geographic folks.
No, I mean, I obviously Rob and I, and actually a third person, Tom Bartholomew, who's Dr. Bartholomew's son. All three of us graduated in 1979 from Hayes High School, and we were all three working photographers, which seems like a lot for a class of like 180 or so. But as far as like working with either of those guys, I'm not so much. I mean, I hadn't seen Rob for a long time, and Hayes High, we had our 40th reunion last year, and actually, we sat on a homecoming float together and waved at people. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, Rob, everyone has their own little specialty, and everyone's been successful at it. So that's kind of good, I think.
It's totally amazing. Being a small town girl, I think that's just incredible. Absolutely. One last question from Harry, and that is, can you explain to us how digital photography has changed the way that you work?
Yeah, well, I shoot a lot more frames. I like a lot more, and actually, I just got some new cameras that are it's essentially they take frame our picture so fast, it's like making movies. It's like 20 frames a second. A video is 24, so you can go to like a Royals game and shoot 5,000 frames, which is way too much, because then you have to look through it. But I mean, it's changed it because now you really, I mean, not now, but then in the film days, you really had to think hard about your pictures before you shot them. Pick your moments a little more carefully, because if you shot 5,000 frames on film, that would be take you a week just to process the film. So I mean, it's kind of made it sloppier than it used to be, and even for people that grew up doing film and picking their shots and really thinking about them, you start getting a little sloppy. And that's something that especially with these new cameras where I can get carried away with just making movies and then just picking a frame. I kind of need to force myself to get back into that mindset. But you also had to not only not think about the moments, I mean, but you also had to think a lot more about the exposure and the composition and the focus and everything, because you didn't know you had a picture until after you went and processed it. And where now you can do something and you look at it and go, oh, that's a little too dark, or that's a little soft, or that's a little, and fix it right away. Where then so everything just took a lot more thought then than now. And it's kind of sad to see that have gone in a way.
Well, for those of us who aren't professionals, it's kind of handy to, all the autofocus and all of those things that, because clearly not on your level.
It's handy for me too.
For us.
It's handy, definitely, but it's sad.
Mary Hammond wants to know, she says, Kentucky derbies are traditionally wet. How do you stay dry and keep your equipment dry in environments like that?
Well, it wasn't wet this year because it was in last month, actually this month, earlier this month. But basically we have rain covers for all our cameras and stuff like that, and lenses were covered up. And the derby's tough because I shoot it from a roof. And so where I am is exposed pretty much. So I may try to get out of a downpour best I can, under an awning or something unless it's raining during the race, and then I have to go out and just stand there and, you buy good rain gear. Hopefully it sort of keeps you dry. You try to keep your cameras dry. It's not fun, but it's just, that's another thing, when they say the glamour of what I do, it's like, well, yeah, but I don't have the option of saying, well, it's really cold out today. I don't feel like taking pictures, at this Chiefs game, or it's really raining. I don't feel like, doing this. So there that facet of it too, but it's part of the deal.
Absolutely. So we had a question on Facebook also. What is the most remote place you've been where you ran into someone from Fort Hays?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I've been to any super remote places that I've run into people from Fort Hays at like at the Masters or at some Super Bowl or some big sporting event somewhere, in the country. I'm not sure if I've seen like Royals caps on people at like Olympics, overseas, but I don't think I've seen any Fort Hays people, but yeah, I've run into people at like, big sporting events, but I can't really recall any. A lot of times I'm kind of removed from the crowd in a way. Like if I'm on a field at a football game, I see someone in the stands, but you don't necessarily, have an opportunity to interact with them.
Right. So I think what I just heard is that we need to try to get some Fort Hays people to the next Olympics. Is that what I just heard from what you were just saying?
I'd be happy to shoot Fort Hays people on Olympics. So yeah, you get Curtis Hammack still there, have him work on that.
Okay, we will work on that for sure. Absolutely. I have one last question, and then Tammy, I'm going to throw it back to you. And that is, how does one get a job with the Associated Press?
Good luck. We're part of a media industry that is kind of going on hard times in recent years, and I think AP is doing a little better than a lot of newspapers, but it goes back to the advice I give students to begin with, where work hard and sort of distinguish yourself from the crowd, because now more than ever, everyone's a photographer. Everyone's got a camera with them. It's an iPhone or whatever, and so everyone's taking pictures and there's a lot of images or whatever, or this goes for reporting too, but you need to set yourself apart from the crowd somehow, where people will see your pictures and go, that's a really good picture. That picture, I know who shot that without looking at the name. And every time they see a picture you shot, they get that feeling. So yeah, but that said, the media industry as a whole is not hiring a lot of people these days. But I feel like if you're talented enough and you have a good work ethic and work really hard, there's always an opportunity for people. But you got to set yourself apart.
All right. Well, I think the baton has come back my way. I want to piggyback on a question that Kevin is asking. He basically commends you for a remarkable eye and talks about how you achieve those different perspectives, like the center field views at World Series or the cross reflected in the raindrops on the window at the Joplin anniversary. So maybe can you talk about those different views, and furthermore, how in the world do you distort yourself, or have you hung from things? Do you crawl into places where you shouldn't? Do you lean over when, because I'm guessing just by Denise's reaction, you probably come home with ripped clothes, dirty clothes. I just want to know.
Not as much as I used to, but I mean, as far as, my philosophy has always been with photography is that, okay, I'm 5'10" or whatever. I want to shoot pretty much as few pictures as I can from that perspective, because most people are about the same height. Well, you might not be, Tammy, but most people are about the same height as me. And I know. So you want to show the world in a way that people aren't used to seeing it. So, whether it's getting a high angle or laying on the ground doing a low angle or different lenses, whatever, I just try to mix it up as much as I can when it's appropriate for the situation. That said, some things are tougher than others. Like sports, for instance, it's hard to do much different because, especially when you're at the level that I'm shooting it at now, I miss shooting like high school sports because you have more freedoms and stuff like that. But you go to Chiefs and Royals and stuff like that, there's only so much you can do because there's only so many places they'll let you be. And now with COVID, it's even more restrictive. It's like, the Royals, there's like 2 spots we can shoot from. And so it's harder to do anything different with sports. And even before COVID, there were weird things like we'd shoot like practices at the Chiefs, and they bring you in for like 10 minutes before, at the very start of practice, and there's this little little area where, okay, that's where the media can shoot pictures from, and so that's my spot. And I was like, okay, I'm using a long lens. Maybe I want to get a picture of Mahomes, and I want to get a picture of the Chiefs sign on the practice facility behind him. But it's a much better picture if I kneel down. Well, apparently Andy Reid has a problem with that. Because on several occasions, I'd been, the media person would come over and tap me on the shoulder and say, Coach doesn't like it when people kneel down like that. And he didn't say why. I don't know if he feels like we're just being lazy or what, but because he's got that ethic where he doesn't like people to, likes people. But I think when you get to be my age, actually kneeling down and getting back up is not being lazy. Standing there is being lazy. But so there are things like that. But yeah, so short answer is I just try to mix things up with different lenses, different angles, much as I can. Different techniques.
Well, I'm sure that there are more questions that we could ask, but one last one though before, and you talked a little bit about COVID, which Jimmy had asked about COVID, but we do have a Facebook question. You're such a low-key guy. How do you deal with your fellow photographers who are rude and obnoxious?
Well, you know, those people tend to, they tend to make a name for themselves, I guess. And, you know, actually, most of the people I work with and deal with are pretty low key, pretty humble, um, pretty easy to get along with. Even you know, some of my best friends are also, you know, competitors, and and so, you know, we may be competitors, but we're also, you know, colleagues, and we also kind of have each other's back. You know, it's like, hey, did you know this was going to happen in the next, you know, later in this event or whatever, and you know, so we take care of each other a little bit. But there are, you know, like anything in the world and life, or any organization or group of people, there are people, and you know, you deal with it. You just, you know, I sometimes have a hard time hearing, so that helps.
Well, Charlie, thank you for the time that you've given us today. Thanks to all of you that are on the call. Certainly have an alumni team that I think are all part of this, from Megan to Noelle to Lisa to Charlene and Jeannie. And they have been working very hard this week. And we're also very thankful to Jason Willoughby and the Fort Hays State University Foundation team for helping us just get the word out for other alumni and friends to be able to meet with all of you. So thank you very much. This will be, obviously we're recording it, and we will be saving it for future looks. And again, everybody have a great rest of your week, and we hope you can continue to join us with more of these calls and interviews when get to know our Alumni Award recipients. Go Tigers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.